Hello, I hope you've all got lots of caffeine coursing through your bloodstream now, because we've got an exciting day coming up for you. I'm Tom Standage, Deputy Editor at The Economist, and I'm your chairman for today's event. And this is the third Pride and Prejudice event that we've done. And in fact, this is part 3 of the third Pride and Prejudice event that we've done, because we do it simultaneously in Hong Kong, and then hand over to London, and all being well, with the technology gods, we will hand over from London to New York in a few minutes, and you will see Zanny Minton-Meadows, the editor-in-chief, I hope, popping up on the screen, and that will be the final handover of the day. Our theme this year is a sort of logical next step from the themes that we've had in the past 2 years of this event. So when we first did this in 2016, the theme was the business case for diversity and inclusion. And it was sort of quite an inward-looking version of that debate, the benefits for companies of greater LGBT inclusivity. We then opened things up a little bit the following year and talked about business as a catalyst for change and the extent to which businesses can and should be advocates for change outside the borders of the company. And we're really going much further down that path this year. The theme this year is the path to advocacy, and this really is about what happens and what responsibilities companies have when the political world starts going in the wrong direction. And we've seen this in a number of areas. You've seen it, for example, with America's withdrawal from the Paris Agreement, where American companies stepped up and said, well, the government may not be interested in climate change, but we are. And I think we're seeing this in other areas too, including LGBT rights. And so that's really what we're talking about here. What responsibility do companies have, particularly multinational companies, which have a great deal of influence around the world, and how can they best use that influence? So throughout the day, we will be referring to this, this idea of moving from an embassy model to an advocacy model. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, this structure, but just in case you're not, a quick reminder of how this works. This is a model from Kenji Yoshino, who is joining us today. And essentially, he has 3 different ways in which companies respond to the legal environment around them when it comes to LGBT rights. The first is the when in Rome model, and this is where companies adhere to the norms and the local laws of the jurisdiction where they're operating, even though they may be very repressive, but they allow employees to opt out of placement in those countries if they don't want to go there. So that's the sort of the when in Rome model, just do whatever the locals tell you to do. Then you have the embassy model, which is where companies enforce pro-LGBT policies within the workplace, within their own offices, within their own campuses, but they don't seek to effect change beyond the walls of the company. So they have this sort of embassy where you can be yourself at work, but then when you go out into the world, you may not have all the same rights. And then finally, you have the advocate model and the advocacy model, in which companies seek to change the cultural attitudes outside the workplace. So they're actually using their influence to try and change the environment where they're operating. So essentially, the mission today is to explore how companies can move from the embassy position, which is the position a lot of companies are in, to advocacy. So we'll be asking how companies can compensate for these rather regressive moves that we're seeing in some parts of the world and in some parts of politics. And we'll discuss where advocacy for LGBT rights overlaps with other social movements and what these social movements can learn from each other. Obviously, we are seeing positive signs on LGBT rights in some parts of the world, but we're seeing negative signs in others. And we'll be asking speakers throughout the day where they fall. Are they generally more optimistic about the way things are going? Are they generally less optimistic about the way things are going? We're starting off with a very inspiring story of positive change, just to get us all in the right mood to begin with. But I think that along with the idea of the embassy advocacy model will be a recurring theme throughout the day. Now, this year's event is slightly different from previous years in that we want to make it a bit more practical in nature. We had quite a lot of feedback from you in attendees in previous events that you wanted sort of tools that you could take away and actually use. So we've introduced these skills-based workshops where there's more interactivity. You can ask speakers who have campaigned in various ways and achieved various things how their advice, what it would be for you, how their experience can benefit you. You'll be able to learn from the experiences of other people here, and it will all, we hope, be much more interactive in that sense. And you'll be able to leave with clear examples of things that you can do in your organization and clear strategies that you can take away and use. Another aspect of this more practical approach to things is our mentorship initiative. And again, this is something we're launching for the first time this year, but it's because we wanted to go further than just sort of having people on the stage talking about stuff and having questions from the audience. That's all great, but we actually want to turn this into real action on the ground. And mentorship is another way of doing that. And this is not sort of mentorship in the sense of, you know, I'm one person and I know this and I'm going to teach you. It's actually connecting people whose perspectives can benefit both sides of that exchange. So very often, for example, you might have small companies that have one perspective on how to affect change in the workplace, and you might have large companies that have another perspective. And what can they learn from each other? So we've been pairing people up. We've asked people to sign up if they're interested in this. We've been pairing them up behind the scenes. That's not a formal part of the program today, but it is another example of how we're trying to make this more practical and make this more concrete and something that you can turn into real action on the ground. And we hope to follow the progress that our mentors and mentees, whichever way around you look at it, make throughout the year and catch up with some of them at next year's event. During the day today, I'm going to be hosting some of the sessions. I'm also going to be joined by Gadi Epstein, who's our media editor, and by Emma Hogan, who's our Southeast Asia correspondent. And they'll both be moderating a number of the sessions that are happening throughout the day. I'd like to thank our sponsors. Our global supporters are Alex Partners, Morgan Stanley, T. Rowe Price, and William Blair. And our regional ally is Biogen. I encourage you all to take your phones out and tweet as much as you like throughout the day. The hashtag we're using is EconPride, and you can actually link your Twitter account to the app. And I hope you've all downloaded the app. The app means that we have a lot less paper sitting around on the tables because we can put the agenda and the bios and all that kind of stuff into the app. And I know a lot of conference apps are really sucky. And I can just promise you, this one is not. This is a really good one. And believe me, we know about sucky apps because I think we've tried all of them. But the one we've got now is very, very good. And you have to put your name into it, and then if you're registered, as you all will be, it magically finds you, and then it gives you the agenda. And you can look up the speakers, and you can see what people are tweeting about, and so we invite you all to participate like that. I'd also like to invite you to participate in two other very important ways. Obviously, the more interactivity we have, the more questions from the floor we have, the better, and this has been one of our best events historically for that sort of thing. And then finally, we have the feedback forms. So we've responded to feedback in the way that we've changed the format of the event this year, and we want to keep doing that. So please do give us your feedback. Tell us what you like and what you don't like, and we have a session at the end where you can give us feedback directly. Now,